Planes fall from the sky, their pilots vanished. Cars, suddenly driverless, career off highways in fiery explosions. Around the world, loved ones disappear in the blink of an eye, leaving behind nothing but their folded clothes and a world plunged into chaos. This is the rapture. For millions of Americans, this dramatic scene, made famous by the blockbuster Left Behind book and movie series, is the literal, biblical endgame. It is the thrilling and terrifying belief that one day soon, all true Christian believers will be suddenly and secretly snatched up to heaven, rescued from a 7-year period of apocalyptic suffering known as the tribulation, ruled by the Antichrist. This idea feels ancient, a core prophecy whispered by the apostles and believed by Christians for 2,000 years. It's seen as the ultimate blessed hope, the final, great escape. But what if I told you that this entire concept, the secret, pre-tribulation vanishing of the church, is almost entirely absent from 1,800 years of Christian history? What if I told you it wasn't a prophecy deciphered from the book of Revelation in a dusty monastery, but a theological invention of a disillusioned Irish preacher in the 1830s? An idea that conquered America through a special Bible and was turned into a global phenomenon by a series of action novels? Today, we investigate one of the most powerful and uniquely American religious ideas. This is the surprising, controversial, and hidden history of the rapture. To understand how radical the modern idea of the rapture is, we first have to understand what Christians historically believed about the end times. For the vast majority of Christian history, we're talking from the time of the apostles all the way to the early 19th century, the dominant view was very different. Theologians and churches, both Catholic and Protestant, generally taught a single, dramatic, and very public end times event, the Second Coming. This belief was based on what seemed to be the plain reading of Scripture. Passages like Matthew 24 describe Jesus returning after a period of great tribulation, and his return would be unmistakable. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, Jesus says, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. There's nothing secret about a flash of lightning that fills the entire sky. At this single, glorious, and public event, a general resurrection would occur, where both the righteous and the wicked would be raised to face a single final judgment. It was one event, one return, one judgment. There was no secret two-stage return. There was no pre-tribulation escape hatch for believers. The orthodox view was that the church would endure suffering and tribulation with the rest of the world until Christ's final, public return. So, if this was the standard belief for 18 centuries, where did the idea of a secret rapture come from? For that, we have to meet the man who invented it. His name was John Nelson Darby. He was an Anglo-Irish preacher in the 1830s, and one of the founders of a movement known as the Plymouth Brethren. Darby was a brilliant but radical thinker, and he was deeply pessimistic about the state of the world and the established churches, which he saw as hopelessly corrupt and apostate. He believed they had failed, so he developed a brand new, comprehensive system for interpreting the entire Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. This system is called dispensationalism. Now, stay with me, because this is the key. Dispensationalism argues that God has dealt with humanity in different ways, under different rules, during distinct historical periods, or dispensations. There was the dispensation of the law for Moses, the dispensation of grace for the church, and so on. But Darby's most radical move was to make a sharp, absolute distinction between God's plan for the nation of Israel and God's plan for the church. He saw them as two completely separate peoples, with two separate destinies. Israel was God's earthly people, with promises of land and a physical kingdom. The church, he argued, was God's heavenly people, whose destiny was in heaven, not on earth. And if you accept this one premise, that Israel and the church are totally separate, the rapture becomes a logical necessity. Darby read the apocalyptic prophecies of the Old Testament and the book of Revelation about a final 7-year period of suffering, the tribulation, and concluded that this time of judgment was specifically for Israel, to bring them back to God. But if the church is a heavenly people with no part in God's earthly plan for Israel, What is it doing on earth during this period of Jewish judgment? Darby's answer: it can't be. It must be removed. And so, the idea of the pre-tribulation rapture was born. It was the solution to a problem Darby himself had created with his dispensational system. He effectively split the second coming into two distinct events. First, a secret, invisible coming for the church, the rapture. Then, a 7-year gap for the tribulation. And finally, the public, glorious coming of Christ with his saints to judge the world and establish his kingdom. It was a theological revolution, and it was about to cross the Atlantic and conquer America. While Darby's ideas remained somewhat niche in Europe, they found incredibly fertile soil in 19th century America. The United States was a hotbed of religious revivalism, prophetic speculation, and a deep-seated belief that it was a nation with a special, divine destiny. Darby's complex system was spread through a network of popular Bible conferences, where his ideas were preached to enthusiastic crowds. But one man would do more than anyone else to inject dispensationalism directly into the veins of American Protestantism: Cyrus I. Scofield. Scofield was a lawyer turned preacher who, in 1909, published something that would change the world: the Scofield Reference Bible. This wasn't just another printing of the King James Bible. Scofield took Darby's entire dispensational system, his timelines, his charts, his interpretations, and printed them as detailed notes at the bottom of the pages, right alongside the biblical text itself. The impact of this cannot be overstated. For millions of lay people reading the Bible at home, Scofield's notes weren't just one possible interpretation. They were the authoritative guide to what the Bible really meant. The rapture, the timelines, the distinction between Israel and the church, it was all right there on the page. His notes became as sacred as the text itself. The Scofield Bible became a massive bestseller. Influential new Bible colleges and seminaries, like the Dallas Theological Seminary, were founded specifically to teach dispensationalism. They trained generations of pastors who then took the doctrine of the pre-tribulation rapture to thousands of pulpits across the country. The invention of an Irish preacher was becoming an American institution. For the next several decades, the rapture remained a popular belief within a specific subculture: American evangelicalism. But in the 1970s, it exploded into the mainstream. The catalyst was a little paperback book by a campus minister named Hal Lindsey called The Late, Great Planet Earth. Published in 1970, it became the best-selling non-fiction book of the decade, selling tens of millions of copies. Lindsey's genius was to take Darby's prophetic timeline and map it directly onto current events. The re-establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. The rise of Russia, the biblical Gog and Magog. The formation of the European Union, the revived Roman Empire. Lindsey argued that these were all signs that the prophetic clock was ticking. The rapture was not a distant event. It was imminent. It could happen at any moment. The book tapped into the anxieties of the Cold War era and made biblical prophecy feel like the daily newspaper. But the final step in the rapture's journey from doctrine to cultural phenomenon came in 1995. That's when minister Tim LaHaye and author Jerry B. Jenkins published Left Behind. Left Behind and its sequels took Hal Lindsey's non-fiction framework and turned it into a series of gripping, page-turning, Tom Clancy-style action thrillers. It fictionalized the rapture, allowing readers to experience the terror and chaos firsthand. It gave us the indelible images of crashing planes and empty clothes. It wasn't just theology anymore. It was a blockbuster story. The book series became one of the biggest publishing successes in history, selling over 80 million copies. It spawned movies, video games, and a whole media empire. The rapture was now more than a belief. It was a brand. So, the rapture's journey is a remarkable one. It started as a non-existent idea for most of Christian history. It was invented in the 1830s by John Nelson Darby as a key component of his new dispensational theology. It was canonized for millions of Americans by the notes in the Scofield Reference Bible. It was made urgent by Hal Lindsey's Cold War predictions. And it was made into a global pop culture icon by the Left Behind novels. It is, perhaps, one of the most successful theological inventions of all time. Its appeal is powerful. In a world that feels increasingly chaotic and dangerous, it offers its believers a promise of ultimate escape, a divine rescue from suffering, and a clear, simple narrative for making sense of the end of the world. But it is undeniably a new idea, a specific interpretation of Scripture that is very different from what the vast majority of Christians throughout history have believed. So now that you know its history, does that change how you see this powerful idea? Is the rapture a dangerous modern invention that encourages disengagement from the world's problems? Or is it a legitimate interpretation of biblical prophecy? A blessed hope for our times? Let me know your thoughts, respectfully, in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into the hidden history of a modern belief fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations into the ideas that shape our world. Thanks for watching.